So, hello and welcome back yet again to The Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, which, at least for the first two chapters, I have enjoyed so much. Not even gonna like fib with you a little bit. So far, it's been really good. It hooked me in. I can see the professor in my mind. And even if he didn't look exactly like the picture in the book, I could see it being similar enough. To me, this portrait of him in the book kind of looks more like Lemony Snicket, at least the movie version. But I can kind of get that. I can get behind that. He looks very irritable. So we don't know a whole lot. We do know that the professor is a geologist of some sort. He studies rocks and minerals, and I'm totally into that because I love rocks. So hopefully we'll get to see lots and lots of cool rocks. We know that the professor's nephew and niece live with him, both orphans, and he has a maid. And for whatever reason, they eat sugared shrimp, which sounds disgusting, not gonna lie. But then again, I have an unreasonable prejudice against any kind of seafood. It's just not for me, which is okay. It leaves more for the people who like it. You know, I'm more of a land-based protein person. Every time I think about stuff like lobsters and shrimp and all that, all I can think is they're bugs. They're water bugs, but they're still bugs, and I just don't want to eat bugs. That's neither here nor there. What is here and there is jumping back in and reading a couple more chapters of this, which I am very eager to do. So let's jump back in and begin with chapter 3 of Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. It's obviously runic, said the professor, knitting his brows. But there's a secret here, and I'll discover it, or else... A violent gesture finished that thought. Sit there, he added, pointing with his fist at the table, and write. I was ready in an instant. Now, I'll dictate to you every letter of our alphabet which corresponds with one of these Icelandic characters. We'll see what that'll give us. But by St. Michael, take care that you don't make a mistake. And thus the dictation began. I did my best. Every letter was called out one after the other and resulted in the unintelligible sequence of following words. M.M. Reynolds, Esuril, Sekjidi. Oh, wow. This is definitely unintelligible. When this work was ended, my uncle quickly took the paper on which I had been writing and examined it attentively for a long time. What does this mean? He kept repeating mechanically. On my honor, I could not have enlightened him. Besides, he didn't question me. He went on talking to himself. This is what we call a cryptogram, he said, where the meaning is hidden deliberately under scrambled letters, which, in their proper order, would result in an intelligible sentence. When I think that there is perhaps the explanation or clue to some great discovery here. As far as I was concerned, there was absolutely nothing in it, but of course, I took great care not to reveal my opinion. Then the professor took the book and the parchment, and he compared them with one another. These two writings are not by the same hand, he said. The cryptogram is of a later date than the book, and I see one irrefutable proof of that. The first letter is actually a double M, a letter which can't be found in Turleson's book because it was only added to the Icelandic alphabet in the 14th century. So, there are at least 200 years between the manuscript and the document. I admit, this seemed logical to me. I am therefore led to believe, continued my uncle, that one of the owners of this book wrote these mysterious letters, but who the devil was the owner? Did he put his name somewhere on the manuscript? My uncle raised his spectacles and took up a strong magnifying glass and carefully examined the first pages of the book. On the back of the second one, the half-title page, he discovered a sort of stain which looked like an ink blot. But in looking at it very closely, one could distinguish some half-erased letters. My uncle understood that this was the interesting part. So he focused on the stain, and with the help of his big magnifying glass, he ended up identifying the following symbols, runic characters that he read without any hesitation. Arni Sakmusum, he said in a tone of triumph. Now, that is a name, and an Icelandic name at that. A name of a 16th century scholar, a famous alchemist. I looked at my uncle with a certain admiration. Those alchemists, he resumed, Avenkia, Bacon, Lully, Pausanias, were the only and real scholars of their time. They made discoveries at which we might rightfully be astonished. Why wouldn't this Sakmusum have hidden some surprising invention in this incomprehensible cryptogram? It must be so. It is so. The professor's imagination caught fire at this hypothesis. No doubt, I ventured to reply. But what interest would the scholar have had in hiding a marvelous discovery this way? Why? Why? How would I know? Didn't Galileo do the same by Saturn? Besides, we'll see. I'll get the secret of this document, and I will neither sleep nor eat till I've found it. Oh, I thought. Nor will you either, Axel, he added. Ah, the devil, I said to myself. Then it's lucky that I ate dinner for two. First of all, said my uncle, we must find out the language of this cipher. That can't be too difficult. At these words, I quickly raised my head, but my uncle continued his soliloquy. Nothing is easier. There are 132 letters in this document, 77 consonants and 55 vowels. Now, the words of the Southern language approximately match this distribution, whereas the Northern tongues are infinitely richer in consonants. Therefore, this must be a Southern language. These conclusions seemed very appropriate. But what language is it? I expected scholarship in response, but I was confronted with an in-depth analysis instead. This Sakmusum, he went on, was an educated man. Now, since he wasn't writing in his own mother tongue, he would naturally select the language that was used by the cultivated minds of the 16th century. I mean Latin. If I am mistaken, I can try Spanish, French, Italian, Greek, or Hebrew. But the scholars of the 16th century generally wrote in Latin. I am therefore entitled to declare a priori this is Latin. I leapt from my chair. My memories of Latin rebelled against the assumption that this sequence of Baroque words could belong to the sweet language of Virgil. Yes, it is Latin, said my uncle, but scrambled Latin. Oh, good luck, I thought. If you can unscramble this, my uncle, then you are a clever man. Let us examine it carefully, he said, taking the sheet on which I had written. Here's a series of 132 letters in apparent disorder. There are words that consist of only consonants, like the first one, MMRNLLS, where others, the vowels predominate. For instance, in the fifth, UNTEIEF, or the next to last, OSEIBO. Now, this arrangement was obviously not planned. It came about mathematically as a consequence of the unknown rule which determined the letter and the order of the letters. It seems certain to me that the original sentence was written normally and then scrambled according to a rule that we have yet to discover. Whoever has the key to this cipher can read it fluently, but what is the key? Axel, do you have this key? I said not a word in answer to this question, for a very good reason. My eyes had fallen on a charming picture on the wall, a portrait of Grabuin. My uncle's ward was at that time in Altona, staying with a relative, and her absence made me very sad because, I may confess it now, the pretty Verland girl and the professor's nephew loved each other with entirely German patience and tranquility. We had become engaged, unbeknownst to my uncle, who was too much of a geologist to understand these feelings. Grauben was a charming blue-eyed blonde, rather given to gravity and seriousness, but that did not prevent her from loving me sincerely. As for me, I adored her, if there is such a word in the German language. So the picture of my pretty Verland girl instantly shifted me out of the world of reality and into one of imagination and memory. I saw the faithful companion of my labors and my pleasures yet again. Every day she helped me put my uncle's precious rocks in order. She labeled them with me. She was a very accomplished mineralogist, Miss Grabuin. She could have taught a scholar a few things. She was fond of investigating abstruse scientific questions. What sweet hours we had spent studying together, and how much I envied the luck of those insensible stones that she handled with her charming hands. Then, when our leisure hours came, we used to go out together. We walked along the shady avenues by the Ulster and went together up to the tar-covered old windmill that looked so handsome by the side of the lake. On the way, we would chat and hold hands. I told her things that made her laugh heartily, and so we reached the banks of the Elbe, and after having said good night to the swans that float among the big water lilies, we returned to the quay on the steamer. This is as far as I had gotten in my dream when my uncle brought me violently back to reality by banging his hand on the table. Let's see, he said. The first idea that must come to mind to scramble the letters of a sentence is, I think, to write the words vertically instead of horizontally. Indeed, I thought. Now, we must see what the result would be. Axel, write any sentence on this piece of paper, but instead of arranging the letters one after the other, place them successfully in vertical columns so as to group them in 5 or 6 lines. I understood what he was after, and immediately I wrote from top to bottom, I love you. I love you very much, my little Grauben. Good, said the professor without reading them. Now, write out those words on the horizontal line. I obeyed, and I ended up with the following sentence. Oh, not even going to try that because it's backwards. Perfect, said my uncle, tearing the paper out of my hands. This already resembles the ancient document. Vowels and consonants are in the same disorder. There are even capitals in the middle of words, and commas too, just like in Saknussemm's parchment. I couldn't help but find these observations quite very ingenious. Now, said my uncle, looking straight at me, read the sentence. To read it, and which I don't know, but all I have to do is take the first letter of each word, then the second, then the third, and so forth. And my uncle, to his great astonishment, and honestly above all to my own, read out, I love you very much, my little Grauben. What? Said the professor. Yes, without being aware of it. Like a clumsy lover, I had written down this very compromising sentence. Ah, you're in love with Grauben? He said, in the tone of the guardian. Yes? No? I stammered. Aha, you love Grauben, he repeated. Well, let's apply the process to the document in question. And my uncle, falling back into his all-absorbing contemplation, had already forgotten my careless words. I say merely careless, for the mind of the scholar could not understand the affairs of the heart, but thankfully his preoccupation with the document won out. At the very moment of his major experiment, Professor Lindenbrock's eyes flashed right through his spectacles. His fingers trembled as he took up the old parchment again. He was seriously moved. At last he coughed loudly, and with a grave voice, calling out the first, then the second letter of each word, one after the other, he dictated me the following series. MMESSUNKASERAICEFDOK SENITTAMURTN ECERTSERRETTE, comma, ROTAVSA, comma, EDN. You know what? That's too long of a sequence. There it is. When I came to the end, I must admit I was excited. These letters, pronounced one by one, had conveyed no meaning to me in my mind. I expected, therefore, that the professor would let a magnificent Latin phrase roll off of his tongue, but who could have foreseen it? A violent bang of the fist shook the table, the ink spilled, and the pen dropped out of my fingers. That's not it, my uncle shouted. This makes no sense. Then, crossing through the study like a cannonball, descending the staircase like an avalanche, he rushed into the congas tray and ran away at full speed. And that is the end of chapter 3. Okay. Thoughts on chapter 3. I like Axel. I like Axel a lot. He honestly, and it's probably because I've been watching far too much Doctor Who again lately, but he reminds me of Rory from Doctor Who. And that's how I'm going to picture him in my mind. Now, I'm going to grab a drink and I will be back and we will do another chapter. All right. Now I've just got this in my head as a giant Doctor Who episode, and I'm going to admit that is actually quite the picture that I'm enjoying a lot. I would love to see this with the 10th Doctor. Anyway, Let's go on and see what is awaiting us in Chapter 4. "He's gone!" said Martha, running out of her kitchen at the noise of the violent slamming of doors. "Yes," I replied, "completely gone." "Well, and how about his lunch?" said the old servant. "He won't have any." "And his dinner?" "He won't have any." "What?" said Martha with clasped hands. "No, dear Martha, he won't eat any more, and no one else in the house either. Uncle Lindenbrock is going to make us all fast until he succeeds in deciphering an old scrawl that is absolutely undecipherable." "Oh, my dear, must we all then die of hunger?" I hardly dared to confess that with so absolute a ruler as my uncle, that fate seemed inevitable. The old servant, seriously alarmed, returned to the kitchen, moaning loudly. When I was alone, I thought that I would go and tell Gräuben all about it, but how would I be able to escape from the house? The professor might return at any moment, and suppose he called me? And suppose he tackled me again with this deciphering work, which not even old Oedipus could have solved. And if I did not answer his call, what would happen? The wisest thing was to remain where I was. A mineralogist at Bascon had just sent us a collection of siliceous nodules, which I still had to classify. So I set to work. I sorted, labeled, and arranged all of these hollow rocks in which each had little tiny crystals on their display case. But this work did not absorb all my attention. The business of the old document kept working in my brain. My head throbbed with excitement, and I felt a vague uneasiness. I had a premonition of incipient disaster. In an hour, my nodules were all arranged in good order. Then I dropped down into the old velvet armchair, my arms hanging down and my head thrown back. I lit my long, crooked pipe, whose head was sculpted to look like an idly resting naiad, and then I entertained myself by watching the carbonization that gradually turned my naiad into something else. Now and then I listened whether a well-known step would sound on the stairs, but no. Where could my uncle be right now? I imagined him running under the beautiful trees which lined the road to Altona, gesticulating, hitting the wall with his cane, violently thrashing the grass, cutting the heads off the thistle, and disturbing the solitary storks at rest. Would he return triumph or in discouragement? Which would get the upper hand, him or the secret? I was asking myself these questions and mechanically took between my fingers the sheet of paper with the incomprehensible succession of letters that I had written down. And I repeated to myself, what does it mean? I tried to group the letters so as to form words. Quite impossible. When I put them together by twos, threes, fives, or sixes, nothing came but nonsense. To be sure, the 14th, 15th, and 16th letters made the English word ice. The 84th, 85th, and 86th made up the word sir. In the midst of the document, in the third line, I noticed the Latin words rhoda, mutable, era, nec, and atra. Devil, I thought. These words seemed to justify my uncle's view about the language of the document. In the fourth line, I see the word leuco, which translates as sacred wood. It is true in the third line. There's the word talibed, which looks like perfect Hebrew. And in the last, the words mer, arc, mer, which are purely French. All of this was enough to drive a poor fellow crazy. 4 different languages in this ridiculous sentence. What connection could there possibly be between such words as ice, sir, anger, cruel, sacred wood, changeable, mother, bow, and sea? The first and last might have something to do with each other. It was not at all surprising that in a document written in Iceland there should be mention of a sea of ice, but it was quite another thing to get to the end of this cryptogram with such a tiny clue. So I struggled with an insurmountable difficulty. My brain heated up, my eyes became blinked at the sheet of paper, its 132 letters fluttering around me like those silver teardrops which float in the air around our heads when the blood is rushed into it. I was in the grip of a kind of hallucination. I was suffocating. I needed air. Mechanically, I fanned myself with the piece of paper, the back and front of which came successively before my eyes. What was my surprise then, when in one of those rapid turns, at the moment when the back was turned to me, I thought I caught sight of the Latin words craterum and terrestre, amongst others. A sudden light burst on me. These hints alone gave me the first glimpse of the truth. I had discovered the key to the cipher. To read the document, it would not even be necessary to read it with the paper turned upside down. Such as it was, just as it had been dictated to me, so it might be spelled out with ease. All the professor's ingenious combinations were coming to their own. He was right as to the arrangement of the letters. He was right as to the language. He had been within a hair's breadth of reading this Latin document from end to end, but that hair's breadth? Well, chance had given it to me. You will understand, of course, if I was excited. My eyes glazed over. I could barely even use them. I spread the paper out on the table. It was enough to take one look at it and grasp the secret. At last I calmed down. I forced myself to walk twice around the room quietly and settle my nerves, and then I sank again into the armchair. "Let's read it," I said after filling my lungs with air. I leaned over the table. I laid my fingers successively on every letter, and without pause, without 1 minute's hesitation, I read off the whole sentence out loud. But what amazement, what terror came over me. I sat overwhelmed, as if struck by a sudden deadly blow. What? That which I read had actually really been done? A mortal man had had the audacity to penetrate. "Ah!" I exclaimed, jumping up. "But no. My uncle will never know it. He would insist on doing it too. He'd want to know all about it. Nothing could stop him. Such a determined geologist. He'd go, he would, in spite of everything and everybody, and he'd take me with him. And we'd never come back. Never. My overexcitement at this was beyond description. No. It cannot be," I declared. "And it's in my power to prevent the knowledge of it coming into the mind of the tyrant. I'll do it. By dint of turning this document round and round, he too might discover the key, so I'll destroy it." There was a little fire left in the fireplace. I seized not only the paper, but Saknusson's parchment with a feverish hand. I was about to fling it all on the coals and annihilate this dangerous secret when the study door opened and my uncle appeared. And that is the end of chapter 4, and we are leaving this off on a cliffhanger. I can never decide whether I like cliffhangers or not, but I do like this story. I didn't expect so much humor and character building in this book. I am very pleasantly surprised. I absolutely love Axel. Is that his name? Alex Axel? Wow, my brain already losing names. I love him though. Like, oh, he is entirely Rory. And yeah, in my head, I've just turned this into one giant Doctor Who episode, and that's going to make it even more fun. If this is a Doctor Who episode and we've got Rory, I wonder if we're going to have an Amelia Pond. I won't expect that many parallels, but that's the sort of excitement that this is giving me. This is giving me like the excitement of discovery, mystery, and I really like it. So thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you think of it so far. Like, if you've ever watched Doctor Who, are you getting that feeling? Because that's the feeling I'm getting. I'm also getting a little bit of the professor also reminds me a little bit of, it's what, Professor Diggory from The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. I'm getting little bits of Professor Diggory too. But mostly I'm getting Doctor Who, and that's making me happy. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed those 2 chapters, and I hope to see you again tomorrow when we read 2 more. Thank you for listening. Please do hit the thumbs up on the way out. Consider subscribing if you have not subscribed already, and I'll see you tomorrow.